Hello everybody, today on the channel something a little bit different. I'm going to be talking about the driving license and why I think we need to change it. I'm sure you've all been there, down the pub or your local watering hole, having a chat with a few friends. The topic of driving licenses, young drivers comes up. Maybe you've seen a particularly poor piece of driving on the road and you think, ugh, if I was a driving instructor, that'd never be allowed through, or, oh no, in Jimmy's Britain, things would be different, I tell you, or, you know what, it'd save a lot of lives if we did this. And though I certainly admire the sentiment behind many of these thoughts, the fact is that great ideas like making someone take a track day before they get a license, or driving multiple cars, that sort of thing, it's just not feasible, is it? And I am constantly concerned by the fact that the cost of getting into a car at all is becoming increasingly prohibitive. And I think it's fair to say that my greatest concern is often the fact that I think many young people are now being put off driving full stop. And I really don't want to see that happening, not only because it's something that I and many others, like yourself I'm sure, enjoy as a hobby and as a passion, but it's also a vital part of life. If you don't happen to live in a major city or somewhere with access to good public transport, and there are a lot more places like that in Britain than many a politician will admit to, it's essential. To be able to drive is to be independent. It's really, really important, and therefore I'm super conscious of anything that would add a layer of cost or complexity to the already fairly difficult process of getting your license. But why am I even bothering then to make today's video? Why have I given it the title that I have? Well, that's because in the last few years, something fairly dramatic has changed. That's the cars. You see, I was out and about the other day driving this, a beautiful Aston Martin V8 Vantage S that's been very kindly loaned to me by its owner Richard from the channel Challenge the Road. I'm up here in Scotland, driving the car about, doing a bit of filming for myself, but also helping him develop a few modifications he's got in store for this car. If you want to know more about those, I've made a whole video about that. By just about any normal metric, this is a seriously quick car. 4.7 litre quad cam V8, 460 horsepower, just under 1600 kilos for this specific example, and I'm sure not many people out there would argue with me. But then I had a thought, and it was one that was sparked when I passed a Kia EV6, because there to many people is a fairly ordinary, boring, run-of-the-mill SUV that is, by the way, an excellent car, all electric, in case you don't know what I'm talking about. However, the spicy version, the EV6 GT, costs less than £60,000. So even not accounting for inflation, it was a car that costs just over half what this did. Yet in a drag race, it would leave the Aston for dead. And this is the case with many an electric car. Because of the way they deliver their power, the fact many of them are all-wheel drive, these things are seriously rapid. I'm sure we've all seen those videos of Teslas and Taycans doing absolutely unbelievable things. If you've experienced one, you'll know exactly what it is that I'm talking about. They are mind-bending. They make you feel sick when you experience the full acceleration that they offer. And the fact is that even their much lower powered variants, cars with 200 or 300 horses, deliver performance in a way that is very, very different to their forebears. You wind the clock back 20 or so years, and the sort of car that somebody would be starting out with would probably be a 1.2, 1.4, maybe if they were feeling fruity, a 1.6 litre naturally aspirated car with maybe, I don't know, 110, 120 horsepower, something like that. And if you wanted access to those horses, you really, really had to work for it. Not only are these cars with relatively little power buried fairly high up the rev range, they've also got nearly no torque and often a manual gearbox. So for most average drivers, they never even got the full power available. But today, getting anything electric, and all you need to get that, is put your foot to the floor and then you're off. And maybe it's just me being old, grey and a bit miserable, but I couldn't help but worrying that maybe something should be done to limit access to these kind of cars. I know many driving instructors, and of late many of them have begun to switch to electric cars, and they've done so for several reasons. In some cases it's because simply it's a more economical thing for them to run and therefore to stay in business. For others, they have clients who only want to drive in electric cars because of the green credentials, and I'm not getting into that one in this video. But there are also a whole host of people out there who feel like learning a manual just isn't worth it. Now, if you're watching from abroad, just to clarify, here in Britain, if you pass your test in an automatic, you are only licensed to drive an automatic. And so there is somebody out there who could go and get a license who can't even be bothered or doesn't want to learn how to drive stick, that could then go and buy a Taycan Turbo, a Tesla Plaid or something like that, and the only thing in their way would be the cost of insurance. Now, up until now, I have been fairly confident that that alone is enough. Yeah, sure, there'll always be some rich kid out there who doesn't care that it's 20 grand to insure a Mustang at 17. And that's fine. The fact is, there are so few of these people, I don't think it's worth inconveniencing everybody else. But now we have electric cars. Now they all have instant torque, plenty of it, and fairly healthy power outputs. This is an almost unintended side effect of the move to electric, and in some ways this is a natural evolution of the adoption of turbocharged engines. Manufacturers adopted them, in theory, because they were more economical. But they did also bring the benefit of a lot more power and torque in a smaller engine. Now, where possible, I don't like to be the sort of person that simply moans about something in a video without also offering a solution, and on this topic, I think I have one. Took me a little while to work it out, but once again, I had a brainwave because I realized actually the solution is already in place. It's staring us in the face. You just adopt the same rules as you do for motorbikes. I have actually noticed, for whatever reason over the last year or two, it's become quite trendy for a few car YouTubers to get their bike license. I believe Joe Achilles and the like have done it, but I actually got mine a long time ago. In fact, I got mine before my car license. Now, back then we already had a version of staged access. So, in short, as I was 17, what you do to get a bike license, you do something called CBT, that's compulsory basic training. It's a day in a car park, then out on the road with a couple of other people on bikes and an instructor, and essentially they keep an eye on you and make sure you aren't an immediate hazard to yourself and others. At the end of that, you get given a certificate, and then you can ride a bike. Depending on whether you're 16 or 17, it'll be either a moped or a small 125cc, no passengers, and you're good for 2 years provided you use L plates. Then, if you want to go for your regular bike license, it was much the same as a car. So you have a 2-part theory test, hazard perception, multiple choice questions, then you go on to your practical. You go out with an examiner. They're on another bike, by the way, just in case you thought they're riding pillion. That's not how it works, though it would be funny if it was. And it's very similar to a car. You have to do emergency stop, various different things and all that sort of stuff. And then at the end of it, you've got your license. When I got my license, what I was then entitled to was to ride any bike with a power up to about 33 horses. And in the bike world, actually, that's about fine. What was really handy was about that time, my dad, who's a big biker, was buying a load of old Japanese bikes from the 1970s, and those all had about 30 horsepower, so I could ride them. But he also had a more modern bike, a Suzuki GSR 600, not the GSXR, the sporty one. This is the sit-up and beg number. And the genius with that bike was that it had an easily accessible ECU. So he bought a spare one, which was restricted to 33 horsepower, meaning when I was riding the bike, he put in that ECU, I had the 33 horses, and when he wanted to ride it, he could put his ECU in and experience it with the full fat 90 or so horsepower, whatever it was. In fact, sometimes I knew he rode it with 33 because it was more than enough. On a bike, it's plenty. Then, after 2 years, I was automatically entitled to ride whatever it was that I wanted. Today, the bike license is even more complicated. I passed both my car and bike test relatively close to one another in 2016. Today, in order to get my car license, it would involve almost exactly the same process, a theory test followed by a practical. To get the same on a motorbike, today I would have to sit an extra 5 tests over 4 years. First off, you have the CBT as it was before. Then you have the theory test, which is largely unaltered, hazard perception and multiple choice. But not long after I got my license, the practical test was split into 2 modules. Part 1 involves work on private land in a controlled environment, typically a car park that's been closed off, and focuses on your basic disciplines. Part 2 is on the road and is very much the same as the old practical test used to be. If you start at 17, you must pass your theory and the 2-part test, but all this entitles you to do is to lose your L plates and carry a passenger. You're still restricted to bikes of 125cc and about 14 horsepower, and that covers most scooters and commuter bikes. This then is a permanent, proper bike license and will never expire, but it also won't ever allow you to ride anything better. The next stage can be taken when you're 19 or after 2 years of experience, and is essentially the same process but must be taken on a more powerful bike. This then entitles you to ride anything up to approximately 45 horsepower. Finally, another 2 years later, you do the same thing again on an even larger bike, now with a minimum weight and power requirement. This finally will allow you to ride anything. Should you be 24 or older when you decide to start riding, you can do a direct access course, which essentially lets you skip the stages and take your test on a big bike straight away. In other words, to ride a motorbike with just 50 horsepower, you today must be at least 21. Realistically, most people will be 22 or older. And the logic behind this, I suppose, is to try and save motorcyclists from themselves. But curiously, a lot of the test also involves stuff that car drivers should probably be taught. Awareness at junctions, emergency stops, but in an environment where they have to do this stuff more frequently, more car park orientated stuff, because as a biker, let's face it, you're not likely to cause too much damage in an accident, but you are likely to be the one that's the most injured. And if for a second you thought, yeah, bikers, absolute lunatics, it's too right that it takes them ages to get a license, let me remind you that it is possible today for somebody that has never ever driven any vehicle of any description in the space of a week to go from no experience whatsoever to being licensed to drive a full 45-ton articulated lorry. In practice, that's unlikely to happen, particularly with the current state of things, but technically speaking, that could be possible. To qualify as an HGV driver, you must be at least 18 and pass a number of exams, including a medical. But there are presently firms offering fast-track courses that complete your practical training in just a week and promise full qualification from beginning to end in less than 2 months. And this would apply to somebody with no driving experience at all. In other words, the government does not trust you on a 120 kilo, 50 horsepower motorcycle at that age, but they do trust you with a 45-ton articulated lorry. If you're confused at that logic, you're not alone. Now, I don't think we need to make it really quite as complicated as it currently is for bikes, but I think there may be some benefits to saying, just across the board, you know what? Once you've got your car license, if you're under 21 or so, and you can do a similar thing, direct access if you're older, you're limited to, say, 150 horsepower per ton. That still gives you access to plenty of stuff with plenty of power that's going to be more than capable. You can still have an MX-5, for example. You can still have fun stuff. And I suppose this might give people a little bit more time to get used to cars, eventually work their way up to something with a little bit more power. And maybe we could introduce some incentives as well for people that are driving this kind of car, that they'll be a little bit cheaper to insure, they'll be a little bit better, they'll be a bit more controlled, because maybe this will be a really, really good way to also make driving a little bit cheaper and say, look, if you're in this probationary period, we know these are the vehicles that you can drive, so therefore we're going to help you out, we're going to make the insurance cheaper, we're going to contribute towards it. I think we need drivers on the road. I know there's people out there that think there's some sort of unseen force that's going to try and drive us all towards public transport, but honestly, I haven't seen a bus the last couple of hours or a train, so I think that is still quite some way off. The individual transport is here to stay, and I'm pretty sure there isn't a single petrol head out there who maybe wouldn't agree with the exact details of what I'm saying, but honestly, they're irrelevant, but would agree with the sentiment. Do you? Let me know. Hop into the comment section down below. Am I worrying about nothing? I don't think that I am. I've seen more than enough instances now with people driving electric cars to make me go, this is a concern. And oh, by the way, just in case you think I've forgotten them, I am also greatly concerned about the elderly, because I'm pretty sure we all know a horror story about an old person, an automatic, and a cash and carry that'll make your blood curl. And yeah, old people in electric cars, I think they scare me a lot more than young people. Not quite sure what we do with the old people though. Maybe we just get like some shortbread and a big cardboard box and a ruler and some string, and we'll lure them in, and we'll get them, and they can't leave until they've done their driving test again. That's the best I've got on that one. Sorry. Anyway, thanks to you all for listening to me blather on yet again. Hope you've enjoyed today's video. Don't forget, like, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.